Welcome everyone to the February installment of the Portland or PDX Tableau user group. This is our first one of the year. So thanks for joining us, and I'm glad we all made it through last year and we're off to a new year. If hopefully that means something. This is going to be similar to our last events that have been virtual. We're joined by people from all over the Pacific Northwest because obviously we can broaden our reach by this being in a virtual format. We're also condensed down to an hour, and that's just to help everybody's short attention span. So this will go by pretty quick, and we'll try to transition quickly as possible between the items on our itinerary. Meaning that I have to not talk so much, which is kind of hard sometimes. This is the this tug is taking self-service analytics to the next level with Tableau and Dataiku. That's the main topic of the main presentation. So if that's what you signed up for, you are in the right place, and we'll hear from Cavanaugh at 1:30. But first, we'll have some announcements. And we have some exciting new announcements that is new to this tug, and we're excited to share. We'll do a community spotlight. This is something that we always do. We just sort of shine the spotlight on someone from the PDX or just general Tableau community in the region somewhere. And this time we're joined by Chris Williams, who I'm excited to introduce you all to. And then at 1:30, we'll have Gus from Dataiku. So on those announcements that we have, we started doing these virtuals at a cadence that was the same cadence that we were doing all of our tugs beforehand. So it was about once a quarter. I think we had around 5 events last year. Though these virtuals are, we have an hour to do them, or they last about an hour. I'm not worried about finding a location. I'm not worried about finding sponsorship for prizes and pizza and beer and all of that kind of stuff. And we've also expanded our leadership group for the tug a little bit. So we have a little bit more capacity and even the willpower to scale this up a little bit. So we're going to be moving from once a quarter to once a month. And we'll continue to have our tugs at the same time as this one. So it'll be 1 p.m. PST, and it'll be the first Thursday of every month. And what'll happen is each of our leaders will be curating and providing the content for each of the meetings for the months following this one. So I'm doing this one. Danny will be doing the one in March. And so on. And then we'll probably take a break in July and then figure out if we'll still be needing to do virtuals at that point. Hopefully not. But I don't want to get our hopes up too much there. So we're excited about that. And we're excited to see you more. That being said, we have more slots for content. We need to fill the space with presentations and just content in general. So if you have any ideas, or if you want to give a presentation yourself, please let us know. We are always interested in hearing what you have to think. If you go to the main PDX Tug page, you'll see a button that says presenter sign up. You can use that, or you can use the email that we have as well. And it can be anything from a full-on presentation if you want to give that, but you don't have to pressure yourself that much. It can be really just is something if you're a part of like a community spotlight, or if you have a quick tips and tricks thing that you want to show, or whatever you're working on, it really can be anything. So please let us know. The second thing we're really excited about is we are starting to think more and implement a mentorship program that is under the umbrella of the Portland or Tableau community. That being said, this isn't specific to Portland. This could be a regional thing. The idea here is that because we went virtual and we had to go virtual, we feel like there's so many things that are missing from those in-person opportunities to meet others. And I look back at my past when I've gone to a lot of user groups, networking events, and have met someone in line for pizza and just started chatting them up. And some sort of formal relationship was made. And then some of those people ended up becoming my mentors and became important people in the progression of my career. A lot of that isn't happening. You can't really just start DMing random people in Zoom. So we want to kind of make sure there's a space for this still to happen. And so hence we're starting this sort of formalized mentorship program. We're in the very nascent phases of this. And so you'll be hearing more about this in the next couple of months. But that being said, I'm going to pass this off to Danny because he's working hard on making this thing become a reality.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, our goal here is really to help add to this community that is ever growing and has a lot of potential to be extremely useful. And we're trying to balance making sure that this is an organic kind of connection as much as it can be, while also facilitating it and making sure that we are getting value, because there's so many great people in this community doing so many awesome things. So a few things that we kind of want to stress here is that the goal is to build a community. Like Ryan said, it's very early on in the stages of setting this up, making it happen. Our goal is to have signups start after the meeting today. So near the end of the meeting, I'll drop in the chat a link that will send you to the sign up form if you want to do that. We will also follow up in the recap email. That link will be in there so we can share that with everyone so you can sign up there. As far as time commitment of what we're looking for this, it's really as much as you want to give to it. So that's something you and your mentee, you and your mentor will have to decide together how much time you're willing to put into it. We're hoping to find different ways to make sure everyone connects and to help facilitate this. And there might be some loose deadlines there, but we really want it to be as organic as possible. Another big question that you might have is, well, who can be a mentor? Who can be a mentee? And we really are going to work really hard to make sure that anyone can fit in any of these scenarios. So, for example, I'm not sure whether I would be a mentor or a mentee. I've been using Tableau longer than I've been in the workforce. So if it comes to technical skills in Tableau, I feel very comfortable being a mentor. I give Tableau trainings regularly. However, like I said, I'm still pretty early on in my career. I'm very open and willing to learn from someone who's been working in the industry for years and years, and there's some value there. So we're going to work hard to try to pair up people, whether it's I'm new to Tableau and the industry I'm in, or I'm experienced and use Tableau, and then anywhere in between. So it doesn't need to be just Tableau centric. If it's career advice. So if you're looking for applying to new jobs and you need help on your resume, help on your CV, however it is, that's really what we want to focus on. So like I said, I'm going to drop that link to sign up at the end of the day today, and we'll also make sure it's available to you later on. But if you have any questions between now and then, I have my email up here. It's just danny.steinmetz@interworks.com, and you can reach out.
Thanks, Danny. We're pretty excited about this. I was looking at the RSVPs for this event, and we just have people from all over the region. We have people from across a bunch of different industries. Portland in particular has a ton of healthcare, has a ton of athletic apparel companies. We have a ton of banking and credit unions and finance, and then even transportation logistics. So there's a bunch of different industries. And so we want to also gather that information too and see if we can pair people up with a specific industry, if that makes sense in your situation. And then there's people all the way from students at PSU all the way up to C-level people that are attending this meeting right now. So there's a lot we can learn from each other, and we just want to create the space to make that happen in this virtual environment that we're in. So look for more information on that. Daniel will drop in the link here in the chat here shortly.
And then one last thing, I know we have a ton of people from all over, including Ontario, Forest Grove, Tigard, and Seattle. You can go wherever, you can be from wherever you want. So don't feel like because this is the PDX Tug, you have to be from Portland. We're going to work hard to pair people up regardless of location.
Okay, now we're moving on to the community spotlight. Chris Williams we just added Chris to our leadership team. We were looking to expand a little bit. So yeah, Chris. We were looking to expand our leadership, and I was thinking of people that I've known to be involved in the both Tableau community and Alteryx community. And I didn't have to think very hard before I thought about Chris. He's been at meetings as far as I can remember, both Tableau and Alteryx. And we've also had some good times at the Tableau conference when those were in person. So I'm excited to add him to the team, and I'm excited for y'all to hear a little bit about him.
Thanks for the wonderful introduction, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Once again, my name is Chris Williams. I'm honored to be here today to talk to you as part of the PDX leadership group, but part of the PDX Tableau user group. So let's continue here. I am the Chief Technical Officer for my company, Precision Analytics Group. We are a business analytics and predictive analytics consulting firm. Been around since 2018, based out of Portland, Oregon. We're COVID certified in the state of Oregon, which is the certification office for business inclusion and diversity. The state of Oregon recognized us as a emerging small business as well as a minority business entity. Overall, I have about 26 years of analytics experience, and that goes pretty much back to day one, which I'll get into in the next slide here. But I moved to Portland from Chicago in 2013. I'm East Coast born and bred. I was born in Philly, raised in the Washington, D.C. area. Graduated from the University of Virginia in '96 with a Russian major and a psychology minor. You're probably wondering, what the hell is he doing in computers? So computers have always been something in my life. It's been a part of my family. And my father taught me BASIC. We wrote games together in BASIC. That's how, I guess I'm dating myself, sadly, but that's basically where I started. And psychology minor is always there, but the language discipline has helped me learn pretty much every computer language I know. When I'm not working, I enjoy cooking. I make a lot of desserts. I make a lot of fudge, a lot of desserts, a lot of Mexican dishes, and a lot of Jamaican dishes because most of my family is from the islands. Volunteering, playing sports, and traveling when we're allowed to again would be something I'm going to do. So let's continue here. As we go forward in my career path, I started off right out of college working, trying to solve the Y2K crisis for a now defunct electronics company called Circuit City. So I programmed in COBOL, RPG, and CL, and making sure that the world did not come to an end when it actually turned the year 2000. So the funny thing about this is that Circuit City was known for their electronics, but my final project that I worked on there was a project for a used car sales prototype company, which you now know as CarMax. So the CarMax was basically started by Circuit City, and then that was the last project I worked on, and then now Circuit City is done. So from there, I lived in Richmond and moved back up to DC. Did a lot of work with helicopter simulators. That was my first exposure to C++ in Java. So I got that object-oriented programming experience. That was a lot of fun. It was just neat being able to work with helicopters and understand how my project was helping them solve, real issues. And then from there, I left and went to Cognos and started really my, hardcore analytics career in the federal government. I worked in the National Counterterrorism Center, doing a lot of work on war on terror. I designed and developed, with a couple colleagues, worldwide incident tracking system, which basically tracked every terrorist incident in the world and which terrorist group claimed responsibility for it. So I had to design the database and all the reporting that was based off of that. So we developed reports that were sent to the government so they could decide how much money was going to go to specific aspects of the war on terror. So I did that for a while, worked in the defense agency supporting crew in Afghanistan, and then also did a lot of work in with analytics with the Air Force and the Navy, where I was working down in Norfolk. So I needed to kind of change the swing a little bit, so get out of the federal government because I was never getting any vacation. So I actually moved slowly out west, and now I'm focusing more on nonprofit analytics. So I'm doing a lot of work with food banks in United Ways, especially in the pandemic. It's been a big need right now, and I'm using Alteryx and Tableau to do so. So let's continue here. So one of the things I love about data visualization is that you always, if you do it right, you know what's happening now, you know what's worked in the past, you know where we're going. And so those three aspects, when you look at a dashboard, you should be able to look at a dashboard and within 20 and 30 seconds, you figure out, okay, this is what I need to know. This is what's happening now. So this dashboard that I have on the right-hand side is something I did for Kaiser Permanente, which was basically doing an analysis of their Scrum activity for certain groups within a release. So looking at Squad 4, we do a say-do chart, take a look at what the last 10 sprints, that's what happened there. You can figure out the team's velocity. You could also figure out for the release story status what's left to do. So I use a lot of conditional formatting to determine whether or not you're in a good spot or a bad spot. So you look at the red there, and that's there's one critical defect there. So that's one thing that the team has to fix. So where do you want to go? You take this information and maybe for your next release, you figure out what your velocity is for that particular team and determine what the workload should be for the next release based off of this information. So when you look at this, you check the boxes of what I have over here plus more, and then the next person should be able to figure out what's actually happening. Okay, so visualizations really should tell you a story, a full picture of what's going on. So let's continue there. I've been doing Tableau for roughly 8.5 years, and I've learned quite a bit. And a lot of it's relatively things that you probably would know, but I like to sort of reinforce those. So avoid scrolling on dashboards if you can. I mean, just avoid scrolling either one way or the other way, and just have everything on one sheet. You want to make sure that if you're scrolling down, that's just basic web stuff too. You don't want to have to scroll a whole bunch of stuff, a bunch of areas to go ahead and figure out what's actually happening. So that's one thing. Dashboards should be created for a specific audience. So depending on whether or not I'm just an analyst or a CEO, when I click on a dashboard, I should be able to answer several questions right off the bat. So you want to have all of your information concentrated there. So the next part of this is, and something this is great for Tableau, is choose the right visualization for your data. So Tableau is really good about this with the Show Me tab. And the Show Me tab will, given what parameters what objects you already have, whether it be dates or dimensions or measures, it'll give you a really good idea on what visualization would be effective, or at least give you a handful. And then you have to choose the right one. And then once you choose that one, the colors are really important. You want to use bright colors for highlighting important information. And then overall, just use pale colors to have a more easier viewing experience. That's one of the reasons for this chart that I used here. I used it in different shades of green. And this is just tracks for different education levels within the state of Oregon. I did this for Oregon Metro, just to give them an idea of what's happening as far as education levels. And, I basically tried different things. So I have a nested chart. I have one Jefferson County highlighted, and it's basically in different shades of green. And the green would, on the right-hand side, will tell you what it's actually happening. But you have highlight this and you get ahead an idea of what the totals are. So I also I try to perform any intricate calculations before I get into the worksheet, just so whether you use Tableau Prep or sometimes I use Alteryx for that, I want Tableau not to think as much. I want Tableau not to think as much and be able to just pop stuff on the screen. And obviously runtime calculations are different, but anything I can do that's intricate beforehand, give it less time for it to think. All right, as we finish up here, the next one, as we continue, there are 3 movies that I always look at when it talks about data. Moneyball's the first one. Billy Beane, played by Brad Pitt, basically use analytics to develop a playoff team based off of a low market Major League Baseball team. So they use analytics to devise how to choose their team. Not the highest paid people, not the popular stars, but they basically did the bargain basement, try to find the best, and they use analytics to do that. Despite being fought every step of the way by his manager, they were able to develop a playoff team. Consequently, that same mold, the Red Sox used to win their title in 2004. So analytics played a huge part in that movie. 21, I've done this, counting cards. I stopped doing it, so I'm good now. But 21 is fantastic for analytics and trying to figure out what's best there. And The Beautiful Mind, it's just a classic movie. I highly recommend that too. Basically fighting schizophrenia to crunch numbers and solve and break codes. So all 3 of those movies I love very much. So that wraps it up for me. As we go to the last slide, I'll tell you one more thing. This is just how to contact me. Drop me a line, hit my website, find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to get to know each and every one of you, but most importantly, thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to working and hanging out with you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. I feel like I've known you for a while, but I just learned a ton about you. You're like truly a man of mystery. So thank you for that. I also appreciate your Tableau insight. But yeah, that was very, very impressive resume you have. I enjoyed that you started off your career working on the Y2K problem.
Yeah,
in COBOL. Yeah.
Full circle.
Also, yeah, no kidding. I always think about Moneyball. I'm just so impressed by how often it's referenced in the data community. And I wonder if that movie never came out, how many people wouldn't be in this field right now. I feel like it's really inspired a lot of people, especially in sports analytics.
Well, and just real quick, that was how the Red Sox literally won their title. They basically took that mold and went and did it. And now you look at NBA teams. The San Antonio Spurs uses Tableau like you wouldn't believe. They're very much into analytics. Seattle Seahawks as well. So I mean, analytics has basically really made its mark within the sports world. I don't know if it started with that, with Moneyball, but I know it caught mainstream activity with Moneyball.
Hmm. Cool. Well, thank you, Chris. I saw a couple rest in RIPs for Circuit City in the chat. All right. Well, appreciate it, Chris, and everybody else. Look forward to seeing more from Chris in the future because he's now one of our TUG leaders. And then finally, for the feature presentation, if anybody was here in our last meeting, you might remember that we almost had Dataiku here last time, but as 2020 went, things got in the way and we had to postpone that. But luckily, they were able to come back for today's meeting. We had a few people request them because they were curious about some extensions that they make for Tableau. And I've known about Dataiku for a while because they do a lot of really interesting work in the sort of enterprise data science space, but on top of that, they're also developing really neat things for Tableau and trying to figure out ways to have Tableau users kind of go beyond what's built in natively in Tableau. So I'm excited to hear what they're working on, and with that, I'll introduce Gus Cavanaugh.
And I will steal your screen now if I can.
Yep.
Chris, I don't know where you grew up in the DC area, but I'm from Alexandria, and I worked at the federal government too, even at NCTC, which is kind of wild.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, hey, no one's innocent. So I want to, thanks for that intro. And I think I'm going to retitle this presentation from something along the lines of like self-service analytics at scale and blah, blah, blah. So you guys are Tableau users. I'm going to introduce this software application called Dataiku, or this company, Dataiku, in our core software application. Hopefully explain a little bit about why you should care. It's awesome that some people have used or are interested in Dataiku and they want to know about the integration point. So I'll spend a little bit of time at the end showing you the different ways that you can basically do something in Dataiku and have it run in Tableau, and a little bit of the vice versa. I just have some brief introductory remarks, and then we're going to spend almost all of our time here in the demo. We only have 30 minutes, so I'll get right to it. But just very quickly, Dataiku, we're one of these startups that's doing data science. This is us in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, which, if you're not aware, is kind of like consumer reports for enterprise software. And we're one of the leaders, which is great. The only bad part is it looks like everybody else is a leader too. But this company is about 7 years old. They've got a lot of customers. We've got a lot of happy users. I can say confidently the product works pretty well. You'll get a chance to see for yourself here in a second. What we actually do is we're a data science platform. So we're a software application that people who do data science can log in, they can connect to data, they can do analysis, they can build things like predictive models. And I'll talk a little bit about machine learning and AI in a second. And then once they've built one of those things, they can deploy their work. So for you all as analysts, you're also one of our kind of core user groups. And generally speaking, what we want to enable you to do is connect to data, do wrangling, do analysis. And then kind of as Chris described, once you've wrangled the data somewhere, you want to display it in Tableau and not have Tableau do a lot of thinking, just do the beautiful presentation. That's where we come in. So we do the parts that are ugly and nasty ahead of that, and then we send that data over to Tableau. But fundamentally, we're here as a data science platform, which means we're part of this AI trend at the moment that is really picked up steam over maybe the last 7 or 8 or 10 years. And I do want to define that, so when we talk for the rest of the time, we just have some grounding. So just kind of, I liked the Moneyball analogy, because for me as an old baseball fan, Moneyball was, okay, that's great. This is kind of like the new exciting thing. But I'm sure there are other people on the call who remember Bill James and sabermetrics, right? And the more traditional statistical techniques that went into baseball. So you had this groundswell previously. There were people doing it, but it wasn't really embedded. It wasn't everywhere. And then, okay, post Moneyball, everyone's looking at on base percentage. Then you got to find new metrics and blah, 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 and on it goes. With AI, it's been very similar. So first, though, let me define it before I start giving analogies. So one way of coming up with the definition is just look where the money is. And that's probably the first place to start. That's where I like to start. This is a graphic. It's a couple of years old now. It's from McKinsey. And it just shows the enterprise investment. So big, boring companies, where are they spending money when it comes to AI? That'll help us figure out what it is. And almost all of the money, based on this gigantic circle, not created with Tableau, I don't think, is sitting in this thing called machine learning. So we'll define machine learning, but it's something that's separate from, let's say, a smart robot like a Terminator, and maybe something separate from like a self-driving car. So multi-use, non-specific applications. It doesn't help us a ton. So we'll unpack that a little bit, but this is the main idea. And when you have lots of money in a space, that generally encourages lots of people to start companies. So, whether it's due to low yields on bonds or a bunch of other macro factors, this from now 2 years old is the data and AI landscape. These are everyone out there. These are a subset of the companies that are doing AI. Here's Dataiku right there in the middle of data science platforms, but there's a host of other things out there. This is a very crowded and confusing space, definitely a red ocean. I'm obviously going to talk to you about Dataiku, but I can't do so without letting you know that, hey, there's a lot of people out here who are going to help you with AI. You'll get my specific take. So to actually define this, if all of that AI investment is in this thing called machine learning, what the heck is that? It's I want to define it as learning by example instead of by rules. So instead of saying, hey, you should do this, then you should do this, then you should do this, we're going to take a bunch of historical examples and say, well, this seems to be working, so thus X should occur. Another way of saying this would just be to use the past to predict the future. So I know that's very abstract. We're going to dive into things that are much more nit and gritty. But if you're with me so far, that if we can better use past data to actually make predictions about the future, rather than just maybe build lots of descriptive and diagnostic reports about the past, that's awesome. Where Dataiku really wants to come in is to say, do those things. And then if you want to build those diagnostic and descriptive reports in Tableau, that's great. We'll help you pipe the data over there. But we also want to start looking towards the future and making some predictions. And there are a couple of key areas where that's where we're seeing a lot of success. I want to share a generic one with you. And on the left side of the slide, I kind of want to talk to people who are either consider themselves to be executives or want to be executives. And on the right side of the slide, I want to talk to people who are like, I work with data. So here's the breakdown. We're riding this massive wave over the last maybe 10 years as well in digital transformation. So no surprise, right? Things used to be paper, they used to be hard documented records. They're increasingly becoming digital. And so on top of that, when you have all this digital information, is there some process to make it useful? And that's largely, we're seeing many enterprises, again, big boring companies, amidst a data transformation. Varying degrees of progress here, but most of them are undergoing it. Many have had a lot of success. So for you all, you don't need me to tell you that, because now this means you have data that maybe previously was in some sort of, these were loan reports. It still takes forever to get a mortgage, maybe at a credit union, I don't know. But there are all these physical documents. Okay, now they're on computers. Now we can start to wrangle them. Now we can start to visualize and analyze them. That's the data transformation piece. What's coming, and is certainly not evenly distributed, is this notion of an AI transformation, which, thanks to Chris's UX explanation, I changed the colors here to make them, make this one pop a little bit more. Hardly any real aesthetics here, but this is your AI stuff, your AI transformation, which is when we start to actually automate the decisions that maybe you as an organization are making. And again, I'm talking now to the executives and the soon-to-be executives. This is how you can think of this as a framework. Now, on the right side, let's actually make this practical. So let's take an example where we've seen a lot of success with AI, but also with digital and data transformation. And that's around patient recidivism. So basically how often people come back to the hospital with things like electronic health records. Google wrote a paper a little while ago, a really interesting study, where they said, okay, can we better predict if someone who was discharged from the hospital should not have been discharged? Because if they come back, it's both expensive and it's really bad for the patient because they're still sick, they still have a problem. So originally, patient records, right, were not digital. You had handwritten notes, you had a host of other things. And over time, those have been codified into electronic health records. So that's the digital transformation that's fed a data transformation. We've started to use some of this data on the left side here, names, symptoms, basic categorical information, things that have labels around. But there was one big missing piece, and that was everything that existed in the text that represented the doctor and the other medical professionals actually writing notes. And so what these guys at Google did was they started to grab that text data. They used some of these fancy AI techniques to do some parsing, some natural language processing. And what they came up with was a predictive model that said, okay, these people should stay in the hospital, these people should be discharged. And they were able to show some drastic reductions in recidivism that saved money and made people healthier. The key thing here isn't that they had some fancy model, it's that they were able to take data that previously the traditional data analysts simply couldn't use. That's the text from the doctor, from the nurses, from the perfusionologist, from et cetera, et cetera. The text data was getting discarded because there was no easy way to label it, no easy way to categorize it. So for doing something like this is where I think a tool like Dataiku can really come in and be useful for saying, listen, if we have data, it's now digital, we've started to label it and classify it. Not just can we build some fancy AI, but where's their data that maybe has now been digitized that we haven't labeled yet, that isn't quite useful for us to use? This is the kind of expanse with which I want to show you the tool to get you thinking a little bit. And just in case this sounds a little too like rosy and like, look at all these amazing things we can do, you can also use this stuff to do things that are not particularly effective. So for example, here's a product, not a Dataiku customer, that I think this is Olay recently released, or released a little while ago, that does some image recognition and gives you your skin age And then from that skin age, it tells you what products you should buy. So this is a picture of me. It reports my skin age is a very youthful 47, which is great, except I'm 32, not so good. And says, hey, my outer eyes are best, but I really need help under eyes, go figure. So this kind of thing, like this type of end-to-end solution, I think is mostly what you're hearing about when people are talking about AI, like, oh, we're going to give you this automated thing that's going to make decisions and recommendations. But really, I think the opportunity for you all is going to be around getting access to different data sources that you don't have now, turning some of that data into things that are actually actionable, and then building pipelines so that you can automate that process, getting all of this into Tableau. So thank you for bearing with me so far. What you're going to see here is the Dataiku application. It's a pipeline. For the technical folks, it's a directed acyclic graph, but it's basically a collection of blue boxes that are data sets. It's a collection of transformations. Yellow means it's a visual recipe. Green means it's one of those predictive models. And on the outside of all of this, once you've wrangled, cleaned, modeled your data, you send it to Tableau and you visualize it. That's the idea. That's the core idea. And I'll show you the nuts, the nit and gritty here. So quick time check. Excellent. We've got plenty of time here. Those are all my slides. We will now go into the demonstration. And I'm not able to see questions, but if you have questions or concerns or whatever you want, do please share them. This time is for you all. So welcome to the Dataiku application. This is a web app. What I'm going to do in this tool is I'm going to work inside of a project. I'm going to wrangle some data. I'm going to build a quick model, and then I'm going to pipe all this out to Tableau. And from my perspective, the things I want to do are those kind of two core ideas I led with earlier, which is basically, is there data out there that I could transform in some way to make it more useful so that I could do my work in Tableau? And also, if I want to make a prediction, is there something out there that how could I actually do that? How could I say, I've got this historical information, I want to start to predict the future, if you will. Or maybe I want to find statistical patterns in my data that might be relevant. These are the types of things we do in this tool. We can also do a few other things, and principally the stuff I'm not going to show you is going to be around the visualization side. Dataiku has some tools for that. Also around building and deploying web applications. So if you are secretly a coder and you love to do web applications, you like to build things with, let's say, front-end HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or Bokeh, Shiny, Flask, I'm going to skip that stuff. Just know that Dataiku has it. Instead, I want to talk about data wrangling and how you're going to connect to data and do some of this modeling. Also, I will confess, I feel a little weird not hearing. I don't do a lot of webinars, not hearing people talk back. So I'm going to just fill those gaps with my own speech. Okay, so this is Dataiku. It's a web app. You're going to come in through your browser, and you're going to open up a project. And I'm going to open up this data pipelining project because I want to walk through, let's try to tell you a little story here. So if you're doing analysis, you're working with data in a couple different places. I suspect, if you open up Tableau, and I've got my Tableau desktop down here, and it's great, it's awesome. You open up Tableau, there are probably times when the data isn't quite in the right format that you want. There are probably times when you need to do some different joins that may not be easy. If you're comfortable with something like SQL, if you're able to write a little bit of Python or R, maybe you can do that wrangling on your own. But if you're not, a tool like Dataiku is here to help you. I should also say, just by way of preamble, that if you do like Python and R and SQL and Spark, if you do like to code, this is also absolutely the tool for you. But I'm really not going to focus on that for the next few minutes. So in my case, I want to connect to some data, and I'm in this thing, and you see these blue boxes and these yellow circles. Like, what the heck is this? This is just a Dataiku project. It's a canvas. It's a workbench. And when I'm inside of a project, I connect to data just pointing and clicking. So I can look for different data sets. But mostly what I'm going to do is I'm going to look across all of the data sources that my enterprise or my organization has. And you're going to see there are a lot of these here. And this is because Dataiku serves the enterprise. Again, I'll keep kind of maligning them as big and boring. They have data in lots of different places. It's often very difficult to get to. And so fundamentally, a value we provide is we just make it easy for you to get to the data that you have. So you'll come into the application. If you know where it is, you'll just navigate over to your data source and connect to it. If you don't, you'll come to our data catalog and you'll do a quick search. And you may look for things like different types of tags. In Dataiku, we want this to be collaborative. Collaboration is probably one of those super overused words, but nevertheless, we're at least striving for that. So when you're inside of this application, you're going to be doing these data wrangling tasks, you're going to be building models, but you're also going to be creating wikis, you're going to be documenting things, chatting with your colleagues, and you'll always be able to find the work that people have created. As good enterprise software, that doesn't mean you can access it, but it's very easy to discover the work that people have done. So again, this is the notion of collaboration, help you search and discover if you're willing to do a little bit of documentation. So in our case, we just want to do some wrangling because I want to get this data over to Tableau so I can build my visualizations and my dashboards, but I need to do some prep on it. So I'm going to take a look at this very basic and totally fake data set that shows t-shirt orders. I don't know if anyone's in the t-shirt business, but at the end of, after 10 minutes of this, you're going to be a t-shirt wrangling expert. So when I look at this data set here, I can see that there's some basic things that need to get cleaned up. So first of all, I've got dates. Those are dimensioned as strings. I would like to maybe do some date parsing around here. I'd like to use either my BI tool or later on in Dataiku, I'd like to be able to work with these as a time dimension. I've got these t-shirt categories, and I just point and click on this analyze button, and I can see that I've got things like t-shirt M and WH t-shirt M, and I want to combine these because these are actually the same color t-shirt and the same size t-shirt. So these types of maybe quotidian tasks that make up like almost all of the work that you're going to do when you're actually working with data. Like there's so much data wrangling and data cleaning going on. Dataiku is here to try to make your life a little bit easier in these steps. When you open up a data set here at kind of an important architectural point, and all really say on the subject, the Dataiku application doesn't store data, and this allows us to scale both in terms of number of users, but also to larger data volumes. So as I go around in this little example and I click on these blue boxes and you see different data sets, what I'm really doing, the Dataiku application is making a request on my behalf. If this data is in a relational database, like this data right here is in SQL is in Snowflake, Dataiku is using a JDBC connection to grab a sample of that data set. And then when I choose to process it, when I actually run my cleaning or my analysis or my modeling task, it's going to push the computation to that external source. So with just as a final tidbit on this, with the the excessive rise of the cloud, which is awesome, we now have the ability to basically rent cars on demand where previously we had to buy them. But for the average user, that's probably not something that you're able to do. Your boss isn't saying, please, by all means, just rent a car when you need one. With an application like Dataiku, we do that for you as kind of a concierge service. So your administrator or you are going to set up external clusters. These are using technologies like Kubernetes. You don't have to care about that in the least. Just know that if you need scalable infrastructure, because I clicked the run button and it's going slowly, we can offload this to something else. So from your perspective, again, we just serve as a concierge of sorts. You say, I want 2 tickets to the opera, and the concierge goes and gets it. You still pay for it, of course, but you don't have to go through the box office. That's the idea. So okay, so that as architecture aside, let me show you some of the data wrangling stuff. If you're with me on this kind of like fake story of, well, I've got this data, I need to transform it and wrangle it to actually get it over to Tableau. So we've done a little bit of connection. We've created a data set. Let's take a quick look at it. What's going on? There's a little charting tool here, but you're not going to use this because you have Tableau, so you're good to go. There's a basic statistical tool, so I can do things like multivariate, univariate statistics, PCA. I can look at my correlations. This is very nice for just getting started and doing things very quickly. But you're probably not going to get promoted if you build one of these little tabs. The idea here, though, is that point and click. Let me get a little bit more insight into my data. I don't have to be an expert. I don't have to be very good at math. I can just say, okay, interesting. I can see the breakdown here in my order IDs. Does this make sense? Now, with a lot of tools out, again, I showed you that landscape. There's a zillion things out there. A lot of tools are going to give you the ability to click on something and start to get these nebulous concept of insights, right? So like, oh, I've learned something. Where Dataiku is really trying to focus is to actually build a pipeline. So the whole notion here is that when you start to do some of this work and it's going to end up in Tableau, if you build a workflow once where you join data sets, you wrangle these data sets, we want you to be able to reuse that workflow. We want your colleagues to be able to reuse that workflow. That's where we actually see the productivity gains and the efficiency gains that are necessary for companies to really take advantage of AI and all the fun stuff that can come, right? So I say that because building this little visualization and looking at some of these summary statistics, maybe the color scheme here isn't very aesthetically pleasing, right? But it's something that's a little eye-catching. But it's not useful unless you actually apply the information. And that's basically part 2 of this application. So every time you create a data set, every time you create a model, and I know we'll get to that stuff, what we want you to do is automatically apply a test to it. And when you're building code for the software engineers, right, there are notions of unit tests and automation tests and maybe canary tests, and there are now popular approaches, CI/CD. The Dataiku approach is, it's basically like you're going to have a series of data sets, ways of messing with that data, and output data sets. And so what we've done is every time you create a data set or every time you create a model, we give you a bunch of built-in tests that you can quickly apply. So you saw previously, hey, we had these statistics. Okay, great. I looked at them, they look cool, but maybe I want to know if the average order date or the average order size, I want this to be flagged within a given range every time I run this workflow. This is what makes these pipelines actually work in the real world, because we know in the real world, I did it once, oh, good. Well, the data is going to change. The world is going to change. I'm Moneyball. I came up with on-base percentage. Well, guess what? Everyone's using it too. You have to adapt. This is built in fundamental. This is at the atomic level. One of those things you need is a test. You need to be able to test all of your workflows, flag them. This is what Dataiku is trying to provide. So with that, I promise kind of my preamble is over, and let me show you some of the tactical stuff for wrangling data. So for you all on the phone, if you're not interested, I'm going to close out this code recipe thing. Who cares? Let's just talk visual stuff. Dataiku has visual recipes for wrangling data, so we can get it into Tableau. And one that's probably the most fun is called prepare. But let me just briefly tell you about some of the others. Pivot, stack, sort, group by. These are meant to be Excel and SQL-like operations, and that's exactly what they are. So I'll show some of these in a second. But basically, if you know how to do a pivot table, or if you've ever done a group by, then when you come to Dataiku or a sample or a filter, you're going to be able to click sample or filter, and you're going to get to do that exact thing. This prepare recipe is pretty fun, and that's the one I want to show you next. And so our prepare recipe is a bit of a catch-all. It's this notion that, hey, wrangling and cleaning data is really hard. There's a zillion different steps you need. And so we built this one that has 90 processors for just a bunch of different tasks. And let me show it to you here on the left. So the way this is laid out, I'll just click this eyeball so we can preview the first step. Rather than Excel and I'll just pick on Excel a little bit, where you open up a workbook and there's spaghetti formulas all over the place. There's VLOOKUPs, index match, you name it. It's hard to figure out where to get started. The notion here is that it's linear. I can look on the left and I can see, oh, this processor replaced those t-shirt names and standardized them. And it highlights in blue very nicely so I can see which rows are going to get replaced. Again, not earth-shattering, not crazy stuff, but very useful. And when I want to share this or I want to see what someone else has done, it's very transparent. It's easy to see exactly what happened and in exactly what order. And Dataiku will also make suggestions for you. So for example, we have these order dates. And if I click on this, it'll just say, hey, maybe you want to parse this as a date. Maybe you want to compute the time since. Maybe you want to filter on a given range. All of these I can just point and click and they'll show up here in the step so that I have my little processor. And what makes this work really well at scale is that I can change the engine. So when you're working with real data, it's not going to be something that sits either on the Dataiku server, or maybe it's not even something that sits on your local on your machine. Eventually, you're going to get to larger data volumes. And again, there are great tools out there to use this. Dataiku is your concierge. I want to use Spark. What is Spark? Who cares? I can just click this, check this box. Dataiku handles the process of taking this, turning it into a Spark job, splitting it up over a cluster of machines and running it. So this kind of fundamental idea, okay, I need to wrangle some data. I've got a bunch of fun processors in here for doing that. And if I want them to execute against large volumes of data, I can do that very easily inside of Dataiku. And then once I've done this, I'm going to have an output. And this output is going to be the next step in my flow. So I had my orders data. It was raw. It was ugly. I now have this very clean, not quite pristine yet, but prepared data set. And I can see, okay, maybe I've still got a little bit of work to do on t-shirt categories, but fundamentally at this point, I've started to build a workflow. I come over, I add my tests here in the status tab. And what I want to do next is actually schedule this whole thing. So fundamental to this notion of a pipeline is that we have to schedule the workflow. We don't want you to use it once. We want you to run it and test it a bunch of times. And so built into every project is this notion of a Dataiku scenario, which is just a scheduled job. And this will let us do something like export to Tableau. And I'll just type that in right here. And I'll create a series of steps and a trigger So run this once a week, once a day, run this every time an upstream data set changes. Send me an email or go ahead and create that export directly, or I could do it as an explicit step in the workflow, build my data sets, etc. I know I'm going faster. I'm trying to give you a whirlwind tour, which may have its, there may be some positives here, maybe some negatives, but I hope you're kind of getting a sense here of, okay, it's data wrangling. We're eventually going to want to build some models, but it's this idea that we build this workflow. We're going to send the data once it's cleaned and prepared over to Tableau, and I'll show you that piece now. But once you've done it once, this is critical. Go ahead and put your tests around it. You actually have a pipeline. You can reuse this. Add your tests, add your scheduled jobs, and you can reuse this thing. Okay. All right. Actually, I can't help myself. I'm just going to check the, as you have questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A. No questions so far. All right. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead to this piece about how the plugins work and how you're going to get data into Tableau. So you have your Tableau server, you're running Tableau desktop. If you want to move the data, it's a very simple operation. You can simply export it. And so I have a basic recipe right here. This is my export recipe. I came to recipes, visual. I did that a little fast. And I chose export. And let me just show you what it looks like. So I'm specifying where I want this to go. We support a couple different formats for Tableau, the legacy TDE format, the hyper format. I can upload this directly to my Tableau server. I've set my Tableau credentials. I've preset those. But if I wanted to hard code them, for example, I could go ahead and do so. And then when I execute this, Dataiku is going to take this data from wherever it exists. In my case right now, it's Snowflake, and it's going to send it over to Tableau. But this data could be somewhere else, HDFS, S3, network file share, not my local machine, but somewhere that the Dataiku server-based application can access. And once it's out from the flow, we send it directly over to Tableau. Again, when I've done something once, I want to add it to my workflow. I'll go ahead and add this directly to my scenario. And now at a certain time of day, whenever I would like, we can go ahead and rerun this workflow. We have our automatic tests running, so we'll know exactly if anything fails. We can take this, we can deploy this work with confidence. So that is a little bit of the high level of, oh, I point and click and I move the data. I want to show you very briefly how this type of work is done, because there's a fundamental component here that's useful beyond Tableau. And maybe this will be kind of my concluding point. So in this whirlwind introduction, I've mentioned, hey, Dataiku, you're going to use this to do the data wrangling and potentially the machine learning that I ended up skipping. Along the way for this audience, I mentioned that there are these visual ways of wrangling data, and in particular, there's this one processor called Prepare that has a lot of fun things for data cleaning and data analysis. Inevitably, we won't have all of the visual tooling that you're going to want. Go figure, 90 processors, you would probably need like 9,000 to cover just the use cases for people on this call. And so the way the Dataiku application approaches this is we have a concept of plugins. And plugins are simply extensions written by people who know Python or R to then add visual tooling to the Dataiku application. And so in fact, the different versions of our Tableau integration are themselves plugins. And I'll just show you this so you have an example. So I'm going to navigate over to my plugins page, and I'm going to go to my development environment. And we have plugins for a host of things, different types of machine learning techniques, different data sets, you name it. If you can write it, if you can think of it in code, then you can write it. And this is one Tableau plugin, and it contains a number of different components. And if I want to, I have the ability to customize this with Python directly. Now, I'm not saying you would do this, right? I don't want to scare you away by showing a bunch of Python code. That's not the idea here. The idea here is to say that this tool is extensible, so that as the world changes, because it absolutely will, some new open source thing is going to come out. There'll be additions. The Tableau application is going to change and continue to grow and develop. You always have the option here with this app, with Dataiku, to continue to adjust, to continue to tweak, to continue to improve. And if that means you want some really beautiful visualization to be embedded, great, we can do it. If it means you want to do some custom data wrangling and have it be a visual tool, we can do it. If it simply means, hey, Tableau changed its format, Dataiku, you haven't caught up yet, no big deal. We can quickly go in and edit this code. So let me conclude here because we just have a couple of minutes left. Dataiku is this application for data science, connecting data, doing analysis, building things, and deploying them. We are heavily focused on on AI, on machine learning, on building these predictive models. But for you all, where we're probably most useful is in this notion of data pipelines, data cleaning. If you had Dataiku in your life, you could come in through your web browser, you could connect to data sets that exist across your organization, you could do this data enrichment, data cleaning, and at the end of the process, you could simply pipe the data over to Tableau and then build your dashboards and have it feed your existing Tableau dashboards if they're already ready. In the event that anything went wrong, you can always go in here and start editing some of the code and changing it yourself or asking us to do it. And if you can think of other things where you would like to do data cleaning or modeling, the Dataiku application will very likely support them. So I think, Ryan, I'll probably stop there. I'll take a quick check in the chat.
Thank you.
Jonathan, oh, can I answer that, Ryan? Is that okay?
Can it? Yeah, let me wrap that into a larger question because I think it's a good one. A lot of our user base and Tableau user base in general either started off using, especially if we're talking about the concept of data wrangling and data prep, started off using Alteryx, and then eventually Tableau has their own product for that kind of thing, Tableau Prep. So do you see your customers that have, do you see it being a replacement and then also maybe perhaps even working alongside Alteryx or Tableau Prep? I mean, the question is generally, is it a replacement or is it something that you would use in tandem?
It has been both, transparently. Where we work in tandem is when you're working with smaller data sets, either with Alteryx on the desktop or Tableau Prep. And when you get to larger data volumes, when you get to non-standard data formats, anything coming like XML, stuff that isn't easy to wrangle, that's where Dataiku really shines. So now the person you don't have to learn how to write code, you get to access the data, you can point and click, you can see it. Maybe a more concrete example, everyone's moved their data into data lakes. If you're not able to access the data in the data lake on your desktop, which is the case for most people, you put Dataiku in there, now you can. You can process it without having to learn this whole Spark thing. Eventually, when you go to if you get to the machine learning side, you want to build one of these deep learning models with a GPU, that also becomes point and click. So that's where we tend to sit side by side. If you want to keep working with your local Alteryx instance, or you can do things in Tableau Prep, great, keep doing it. But typically, it's going to be the data volumes and the data location that will drive you to something like us.
So it sounds like it's a scalability thing. And then the types of data that you might be bringing in, that Dataiku might be a little bit more flexible there. And then the data sciencey kind of side of things that's something that Tableau Prep doesn't have. And so that's where Dataiku would come in. Okay. Any other questions for Gus?
So much for letting me join. I really enjoyed the initial presentation and good luck with your group.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Gus. Thank you everyone for joining. Oh, I think we had another last minute question if we wanted to throw that in there really quick. Do you have to be a data scientist to use the NLP features?
Maybe the double-edged sword here is with our tool, you can point and click. The quality, did you point and click on the right thing? Data science knowledge will definitely be helpful. But we do have visual tooling built on top of Spacey, NLTK, TextBob, popular open source packages. So if you're looking to do things like named entity recognition of their particular tasks, very easy. If you're like, well, what is NLP? You can try it out in Dataiku. The results may not be amazing, but it's absolutely available for you without coding. But knowledge is always good.
Okay, well, I think we'll end it there. We're at 2 o'clock. Thank you again, Gus. Glad you could make it this time and tell us about Dataiku. Danny just dropped the
question.
Yeah, we have one more question. Asking about the pricing of Dataiku. That might be a longer conversation that Dimitri asked, but
not free, but yeah, I'll have to direct you to one of the sales guys.
Okay. So Danny just dropped the mentee mentor sign up form in the chat. Feel free to sign up. You're not committed or obligated to anything just by simply signing up. We just want to we want to gauge the interest there. We'll probably reach out to you to get more information, and then you'll hear about this again in our next meeting. which is March 4th. And everything from this meeting will be recorded. We'll put on Tableau's YouTube page, and I'll send you a link to that in a follow-up email, hopefully later today. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you soon. We'll see you next month.